Hello everybody, I just wanted to do a quick video. I had a thought experiment kind of idea where there is this book called King's Dark Tidings by Kelcade, and she has a character, the main character, Rezkin, and he has very different ideas and philosophies and morals than the average person. And in the book and in our world, and so it really is interesting to think about how maybe nurture, as some people call it, but just like how you're raised and the morals that you're taught affect who you are and what you care about. You and me and most people, at least in North America, we care about laws because we're raised that way. We're raised to care about the things in the world that, the driving laws and, don't murder, and those are the big ones. And then of course there's the smaller laws: don't steal, which by smaller I don't mean theft is not significant. I just mean like there's like petty theft, and there's like stealing someone's credit card number or stealing someone's identity, or you could like swipe a salt shaker, or there's like levels of theft. I don't know if there's degrees of theft, but we have degrees of murder, which is premeditated. So we consider certain types of murder worse than others. For example, manslaughter is completely unmeditated. It's an accident, and so that's less of a punishment because you never intended to, whereas there's fully premeditated, and so you had every intention of carrying this out. You planned it, and you had full motive, and all the ideas pre-existed. And then I think there's in between where like it was spur of the moment, but it was still intentional. It's not manslaughter, but it wasn't premeditated, and so I think that's technically not as bad. And there's all these things. There's insanity. Anyways, so we have our laws. I tangented hard there. Sorry about that. We, of course, have our internal, like, moral compass or conscience that kind of guides us day to day. And we think, like, oh, this probably isn't such a good idea. Or, like, oh, no, that seems fine. And some people's is stronger than others. And that can be natural. Like, a lot of people are born with it. And it can also be a learned thing, and it can also be an unlearned thing. People can learn to be less sensitive to their moral compass and ignore their conscience more easily. And then of course you have like religion, and religion has a lot of stuff that comes with it. Like the biggest one, I think the most well known, is no sex before marriage. So, and that's a big one. That's like really only a problem if you were raised religious, I'm pretty sure. And then if you're raised non-religious, I don't know of anybody where they care about no sex before marriage. It's more like, please don't get pregnant and then have a kid and have to spend all your time and money raising that kid, and you don't have a supporting father figure, and so the kid's going to be raised poorly and also with very little amounts of money, and so your life will be sort of ruined. More like that. But anyways, so you have the law, you have your moral compass, internal. You would have other people's moral compasses, I suppose, but that's not really relevant here. And then you would have your religion, whatever that is. So getting back to what started the idea of this video, if you were raised in a certain way, you would have either a different moral compass or no moral compass. In the book, Kelcade's King Dark Tidings, Rezkin, the main character, he was raised to be an assassin, to put it simply. And so he, from birth, he understood that like life and death are hand in hand, and he has no problem killing people. It's really not an issue for him morally, and it brings to mind the idea that he he doesn't have a problem with killing because he was never told killing is bad. And so why would he think that? Now, he was raised with people and he cared about them, and he never just like killed them in their sleep. So he understood that there were certain people that you kill and certain people that you don't. And he also makes friends and has no desire to kill them. Or there's people who he kills other people for because he knows, oh, this is a good person and this is not a good person. So he understands, like, he doesn't appreciate rape. So he kills some people who forcibly force themselves on someone. And, so he has sort of a moral compass that I think the hero figure would have, but he's very much an anti-hero. But in most cases, you don't get to see why an anti-hero doesn't mind killing, whereas in his case, you get a look at his childhood and how he was raised, his nurture environment, and you get to see how, in theory, for the book, that has affected his morals and ethics. Rezkin also has no issue with like breaking laws. He kind of does whatever he wants, and the law is mostly just another boundary that he sometimes has to deal with, but it's not something. He wasn't really raised with the law. He was raised to know the law and also to break the law, and so he doesn't really see it as a structure that he's beholden to, but he also knows enough about it to know how to circumvent the law, and so he has the knowledge. But if he wasn't raised to know the law and was simply raised without the law, then if he came into a city or something where there were all these rules that everyone was following because the government told them to, he might think that was quite odd. Why would you follow the rules of someone else? Just follow your own rules, and that's probably fine. I don't kill people because I am a person and I want to respect other people's autonomy, not because some higher figure who's also a person has requested that I do not. So this kind of got me thinking, if someone was actually raised in this alternative lifestyle where laws and religion were not really part of their life, how would they grow up to be a different person? And the only thing I could think of that would be anything that would still set a person up for a decent life in this world is to, instead of following laws, instead of always following the laws and the rules, and you follow the logic. And so what if you were raised to always follow the most logical path to a conclusion and follow that? Would this get you to be safe on the roads, to survive in a society full of other people who don't live the same way that you do? No, you would probably be seen as odd, and you might have moments where the most logical conclusion is to do something against the law. But if you're on the road, the most logical thing to do would be to follow the rules as they are being presented. And what I mean by that is you always want to use your signal light when other people are around, because that helps other people know what you're doing, and that keeps everyone safer. And if everyone's safe, you're safe. But you don't have to use your signal when no one's around, and some people do. Another example is going the speed limit. Going the speed limit is the law, but sometimes it's not the safest thing to do. And sometimes logically, the safest thing to do is to go the same speed as everyone else. Of course, we've all experienced this where, the speed limit's 60, but there's 6 cars around you and they're all going 80 or 90. So you probably, honestly, the safest thing to do is to match speed. And it goes the other direction too. If there's someone who's being very silly and going very, very fast, that's also unsafe. So it goes in both directions. Another example of using logic and being able to use that to survive day-to-day life would be, I guess, relationships. There's not really rules around relationships per se, but there are laws. And there's a lot of things I could go into. I'm trying to think of what living a life of logic also kind of fits with my idea of good and bad aren't a thing, but harm and no harm are a thing. Essentially what that means is that I don't necessarily know what is truly good or truly bad in a capital good or capital bad sense of the word, but I know what would cause me or other people harm to a more or less degree, and I know what would cause me or other people less or no harm, or bring up negative harm, I guess. Positive effect would be like negative harm. And so consequentially, if this was tied with a logical framework of the world, then hopefully a person would conclude that, the most logical path in a circumstance where you require maybe some sort of moral guidance would be, the most logical path would be the path of least harm. And this would allow for a person to maybe follow laws without intending to, or in the case of a relationship, to get into the idea of least harm to the partner. And so that would follow the ideas that a lot of people are, starting to finally come up with, like consent, which of course, but it's weird to say, like, it's sort of just becoming popular. Consent is like finally sort of a thing that we talk about. So consent would be the least amount of harm, or in hopefully in most cases negative harm. So it would be a positive, and so everybody's consenting. So that would be like the most logical path to follow. So even though there's no laws or rules written down anywhere that are telling you this is how you have to be in a relationship, I believe consent is a law, but it's based around someone's autonomy. But as a relationship rule, there's no relationship rules written down anywhere. And there's some things like maybe being rude to your partner that one person might be okay with and another person might not, because your partner knows that you're joking, whereas someone else might think you're actually being rude. And so, but you've consented to be rude, or your partner has consented essentially for you to be rude to them. And so I think, but I really, really, really want someone to prove me wrong, or bring forward evidence for or against, whatever. I think that a person raised with a somewhat of a moral framework and an extremely solid logical framework of the world, where more or less everything they do is logically based, they could then come out into the world after being, I guess, in seclusion, being raised in some weird secluded environment. They could then come out into the rest of the world and, in theory, do pretty okay. Overwhelm notwithstanding. And in the case of Rezkin, of course, he was raised with rules. He had like 247 rules, I think it was, and he follows the rules, and those are his guiding principles. And then he has his internal ethics that he doesn't really talk about, and he mostly tries to ignore, but it's constantly there in the book. He's constantly doing what he believes is the right thing. And it's usually pretty brutal, but I don't tend to disagree with his methods, if I'm honest. But anyways, so I just think it's an interesting thought experiment, thinking about if someone was raised with no laws and no religion, but they were raised with some sort of bounding framework, how would that affect them and their I guess, outcome? How would that affect them being able to navigate the world functionally with the rest of us who do get raised with religion and legal systems? So yeah, thanks for anybody who took the time to watch this. I hope to make more of these, but my ideas are few and far between, and I find I have less and less time these days. So if anybody does have an idea for me, shoot it my way, and I will think about it and make a video. All right, thanks. Bye.